They say not all heroes wear capes, some walk on four legs, carry no name, and speak only through their presence. In a quiet town where no one was watching, a little girl stood trembling at a bus stop, too scared to speak, too small to be seen. But one morning, a stray German shepherd appeared, and everything began to change. This isn't just a story about a dog, it's about courage found in silence, and the bond that saved more than one soul. If you believe in the kind of magic that doesn't shout but still leaves a mark, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and stay until the end. Because some stories start with a bark, and end with a miracle. Springdale was the kind of town that didn't make the news. Nestled between Oregon's rolling green ridges and sleepy pine forests, it woke each morning under a quiet veil of mist, the kind that clung to mailbox flags and dripped slowly from rusted swing sets. It was early spring, and the dampness in the air smelled faintly of wet bark and forgotten leaves. By 6:30 a.m., the streets were mostly still, save for a few joggers in hoodies and the distant hiss of sprinklers struggling to wake up the lawns. On the corner of Maple and 4th, a cracked sidewalk met a faded yellow bench, Springdale's most unremarkable bus stop. But each morning, it hosted a ritual that only one pair of eyes seemed to notice. A small girl, around 8 years old, stood beside the signpost, her body half hidden beneath an oversized lavender jacket. Her name was Lily Sanders. Lily had the kind of face that always looked like it wanted to apologize. Pale skin, a scattering of freckles across the bridge of her nose, and large green eyes that rarely made contact with the world around her. Her thin brown hair was always neatly brushed, though often tangled again by the wind before the bus even arrived. She stood with her backpack hugged to her chest, not slung over her shoulder, not held casually, but clutched like a shield. She never played with the zipper or looked at her phone like other kids. Instead, she just stared down at her sneakers, her toes curling inward slightly, as if she were trying to make herself disappear. She didn't speak. She didn't move. But someone, or something, was watching her. Across the street, tucked beneath the drooping branches of a dogwood tree, lay Ranger. Ranger was a German shepherd, large and lean with a broad chest, faded black saddle, and tan legs scarred from an old injury on his right side. His left ear stood straight while the right drooped just slightly at the tip, an imperfection from a training accident long ago. His eyes were a striking amber, intelligent and sharp, and always watching. At a glance, he looked like the kind of dog who should have been behind a chain-link fence in a police K-9 yard. And once, he had been. Ranger was around 6 years old, though life had aged him early. He was once enrolled in a K-9 program in nearby Portland but was discharged during early training due to behavioral inconsistencies. Too reactive, the trainer had said. Too much instinct, not enough obedience. After a failed adoption, Ranger ended up in the shelter system, then out of it, slipping through the cracks, ending up in Springdale. But something in him still watched, still waited, like the soldier they hadn't quite managed to break. He had no collar, no leash, and no real home. But he had chosen this street, this bench, and this girl. Lily had seen him once, weeks ago, lurking beneath the trees. She hadn't said a word. He hadn't come closer. But something passed between them. A silent agreement, I won't hurt you. I see you. Each morning, Ranger arrived first, just before the school bus. He lay flat, blending into the shadows, watching. Not the kind of watching a hungry stray might do. His gaze was alert, focused. Protective. And each morning, Lily stood there in silence. But not this morning. This morning, something shifted in the air. It was barely 6:42 when a boy, tall for his age, maybe 11, stepped off the corner behind Lily. He wore a black hoodie with the sleeves half-rolled and a pair of scuffed-up Vans. His name was Toby Reed, a kid known for his cocky smirk and quick fists. Teachers described him as energetic. Kids called him mean, but smart enough to know when not to get caught. His eyes were cold slate gray, always flickering as if calculating. He didn't greet Lily. didn't shove her either. Instead, he walked slowly around her, like a predator testing boundaries. Then, with a sudden movement, he kicked the bottom corner of her backpack, not hard enough to knock her down, just enough to unbalance her. Lily stumbled. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just adjusted her footing, reclutched the straps, and stared harder at the ground. But Ranger moved. He leapt to his feet and let out a single, sharp bark. Loud. Deep. Echoing through the still morning air like a rifle crack. Toby froze. His head snapped in the dog's direction. For a moment, his bravado faltered. Ranger didn't growl, didn't charge, he just stood at the edge of the sidewalk, head raised, muscles taut. Eyes locked on Toby like crosshairs. Toby gave a short, nervous scoff and turned away. A window creaked open across the street. An older woman in a pink robe peeked through her blinds. Another neighbor, Mr. Delaney, who usually walked his pug around this hour, paused and stared. For the first time in many mornings, people had noticed. Lily looked up. Just slightly. Her eyes flickered to Ranger, and her fingers loosened on the backpack straps. Not a smile, not yet, but something that wasn't fear. The bus arrived at 6:47, tires squealing slightly as they stopped. Number 17, scratched and faded from years of runs, hissed open its door. The driver, a broad-shouldered man in his 60s with a bushy mustache, barely glanced toward the sidewalk. His name was Walt, a war veteran turned driver, known for being punctual but inattentive. Walt had seen too much in life and now seemed to see nothing. Lily climbed the steps. Toby followed. Ranger didn't move. But his eyes did. He watched as Lily disappeared behind the folding doors. He watched as the bus pulled away, trailing exhaust into the cool air. Then, he stepped closer to the sidewalk and sat. As if to say, "I'll be here when you come back." It wasn't just a bark. It wasn't just instinct. Something had begun. The morning fog in Springdale hung lower than usual, curling around streetlights like fading breath. It was Wednesday, and the clock had just turned 6:35 a.m. At the corner of Maple and 4th, Ranger waited, his ears alert, his chest still rising and falling with the calm rhythm of someone on watch. The sidewalk, still slick with dew, glistened faintly in the early light. There was no sound but the distant hum of power lines and the occasional rustle of wind. Lily hadn't arrived yet. Inside a modest one-bedroom apartment above Benson's Pharmacy, Amanda Sanders stood in her tiny kitchen, staring at the slow drip of her coffee pot. She was in her early 30s but looked older lately, tired in a way that sunk into the shoulders and pulled at the corners of her eyes. Her long chestnut hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore pale green scrubs from her overnight shift at Springdale General Hospital. Amanda had worked nights ever since Lily was in first grade. Better pay, she'd told herself, but truthfully, it had been survival after Lily's father left 2 years ago, leaving only a voicemail and a short envelope with a torn photograph inside. Amanda rubbed her temples and glanced at the clock, 6:38. She grabbed a foil-wrapped granola bar and knocked on the bedroom door. "Lily, honey, bus is soon. You need to eat something." There was a soft rustle, then silence. Amanda opened the door gently. Lily was dressed, sitting on the edge of her bed, arms around her knees. Her lavender jacket was zipped to her chin, her backpack already at her feet. She didn't look up. Amanda forced a smile. "Here, take this. I'll be home before dinner, okay?" Lily nodded. Not a word. Amanda hesitated, her hand hovering for a moment over her daughter's head, then dropped it. She whispered, "I love you," before turning away. Down on Maple Street, Ranger lifted his head as Lily appeared, her small figure moving like a shadow. She walked slower than yesterday, her steps uncertain. She didn't look at him. She never did. But Ranger didn't mind. He just trotted a little closer behind her today, as if closing the gap between two untold stories. At the school gates, he stopped. He always did. The moment Lily disappeared inside the building, he'd loop back through the trees, lie beneath the dogwood, and wait for the next morning to come. But today, Ranger didn't leave. Instead, he followed the scent, Lily's scent, around the fence line, then ducked under a gap in the corner chain link, the one bent open just enough for a large dog to slip through. No one saw him. Not yet. Inside the school, in room 12B, the students of Miss Janice Morales were slowly beginning their day. Miss Janice was a thin woman in her late 60s, with thinning gray curls tucked into a loose braid. She wore colorful earrings and cardigans that smelled faintly of eucalyptus. She had been teaching second grade for over 30 years. Widowed young, with no children of her own, she had made the classroom her sanctuary. She knew every pencil scrape, every nervous sigh, every silence that carried weight. And lately, Lily Sanders had become a silence with weight. She never raised her hand. Never volunteered. But what worried Miss Janice more wasn't the lack of noise, it was the way Lily now spent her art hour. The little girl had once drawn butterflies, wide fields, smiling suns. Now, she only drew people. But not faces, just heads. Blank circles. Sometimes rows of them, sometimes one standing alone. At the back of the room, Lily sat at her desk, gripping a short black crayon. The paper in front of her showed a figure standing between two others. The central figure was smaller. The ones on either side were taller and had no faces. She pressed the crayon harder. The paper began to tear. Lily? Miss Janice's voice was gentle, like stepping into a dream. Lily didn't look up. But her hand paused. Miss Janice walked closer and knelt beside her. "That's a strong drawing," she said carefully. "Can you tell me what it means?" Lily's fingers clenched around the crayon. She gave the faintest shake of her head. Just then, a quiet knock interrupted the silence. The door opened, revealing the school secretary, a short woman named Patricia Dean, in her early 50s with neatly curled brown hair and a clipboard always tucked under one arm. "Miss Morales, sorry to interrupt. There's a dog in the hallway." "A what?" "I think it's a German Shepherd. Sitting right outside the second grade wing. The janitor's trying to shoo it off, but it won't budge." Miss Janice frowned. "A German Shepherd?" Patricia nodded. "It's not aggressive. Just watching." Miss Janice's eyes drifted toward Lily, who now stared at her desk, still unmoving. A flicker of something crossed the teacher's face, like puzzle pieces beginning to stir. "Pat, can you make sure the dog's not hurt? Maybe call animal control if needed, but, gently." Patricia blinked. Sure." After she left, Miss Janice glanced once more at Lily. Lunchtime came, and the classroom emptied into the cafeteria, but Lily lingered behind. Miss Janice pretended to busy herself near the bookshelf. "Lily, sweetheart, you can join the others." Lily stood. Her mouth opened slightly. Then closed. She turned and walked slowly out. That afternoon, Ranger still sat near the hallway door. He had been led outside, twice, by a kind janitor named Ernie, a tall, round man in his late 60s who smelled faintly of citrus cleaner. But both times, Ranger had found a way back in. He wasn't barking. He wasn't pacing. He just watched. When Lily passed by on her way to gym, their eyes met. Just for a heartbeat. And that was the first time Lily ever stopped mid-step. She didn't smile. Didn't speak. But she looked at him. Ranger blinked slowly. Lily turned her head and kept walking. But something had shifted in her posture, less curled inward, more grounded. The gym teacher, Mr. Blake, a barrel-chested man in his 40s with thinning hair and a loud voice, was calling roll when Lily arrived. He rarely noticed the quiet ones. His attention was usually pulled by the louder kids, the ones throwing dodgeballs before the whistle. So he didn't see Lily flinch when one boy tossed a basketball too close to her head. He didn't notice the way she stood alone, hugging her elbows. But Ranger did. He had circled around the outer fence by then, positioned just behind the gym side window, barely visible unless you were looking. Lily glanced toward the window. A brown ear twitched. Someone was still watching. The morning mist in Springdale lingered a little longer than usual, hanging thick above the hedgerows and curling around the tires of the approaching school buses. It was Friday, just after sunrise, and the light spilled down the quiet street like warm breath on glass. Maple and Fourth had become an unspoken gathering point, still silent, still unremarkable to most, but this morning, something would fracture. Lily Sanders stood as she always did, silent, still, hugging her backpack to her chest like it might vanish if she let go. Her lavender jacket was zipped high, her breath visible in the cool air. There was a tiredness around her eyes, the kind that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying something too heavy for someone her size. She hadn't noticed the boy approaching yet. Toby Reed, tall for 11, approached from behind with a bounce in his step and an apple in his hand. His black hoodie hung loose, fraying at the cuffs, and he wore a constant smirk like the world was one long private joke. His hair, dark and coarse, fell just past his ears, unkempt but calculated. He moved through spaces like he owned them, hallways, sidewalks, lunch lines, and nobody ever stopped him. This morning, he sauntered right up behind Lily and without warning, yanked the straps of her backpack. The momentum threw her slightly forward. She gasped, stumbled, but didn't fall. Before she could turn around, he snatched the backpack fully from her grip and hurled it onto the sidewalk, where it skidded against the curb, spilling 2 pencils and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Lily froze. Her hands hung uselessly in the air for a second, then dropped. She didn't move to retrieve it. Ranger did. From the other side of the street, he had been watching, body tense, ears forward. When the backpack hit the ground, Ranger let out a low, guttural growl. The kind that came from deep inside the chest, a sound meant for warning, not show. Toby turned, startled. He saw the dog's eyes, amber, unblinking. He didn't say a word. His smirk faded into something closer to contempt, but not quite fear. And then, someone else saw it too. Across the street, a small booth painted red and white stood beneath a lamppost. It belonged to Henry Lobo, the local hot dog vendor who had served the same corner for nearly a decade. Henry was in his mid-50s, a broad man with thick glasses and a handlebar mustache. He wore a faded green army jacket year-round, even in summer. A Gulf War vet, he spoke little, but observed everything. He had a quiet fondness for kids and dogs, though he preferred the latter. They didn't talk back. This morning, Henry had just set his coffee on the cart when he saw Toby throw the bag. His hand instinctively reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't usually record things, he barely used social media, but something about the dog's reaction struck him. He pressed record just as Ranger trotted across the street. Ranger approached the backpack slowly, his body language calm but alert. He sniffed it, then sat beside it, like a guard taking post. His head turned, eyes scanning the area, as if daring anyone to touch it again. Lily, across the sidewalk, still hadn't moved. Henry stopped recording. That was enough. Within hours, the clip was up on a local community page, Dog Protects Girl's Backpack at Springdale Bus Stop. No names. No accusations. Just a dog, a girl, and a moment of unspoken loyalty. But the internet had teeth, and people were watching. By lunchtime, Ranger had become the bus stop dog. In the faculty lounge of Springdale Elementary, the video played on a cracked phone screen propped against a coffee pot. Teachers huddled, murmuring. "She's one of mine," said Mr. Jensen, a 4th-grade teacher with thinning blonde hair and a heavy-set frame. "Quiet girl. Doesn't really speak up." Her name's Lily, Miss Janice corrected gently, sipping chamomile tea. Second grade. The buzz didn't stop there. By evening, Henry's footage had 1,400 views. A local pet rescue reposted it. Someone added music. A teenager in town made a meme. But for Lily, none of that mattered. At home, she sat at the kitchen table while Amanda reheated soup in the microwave. Amanda's hair was still in a work bun, and her scrubs smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. She was drained, hunched slightly, her shoulders tight. "I saw a dog near your school today," Amanda said casually, trying to bridge the growing silence. "Big one. Shepherd, maybe. Know anything about that?" Lily stirred her soup. She didn't look up. But under the table, her foot nudged against her backpack, now slightly scuffed at the corners. Amanda tried again. "They're smart dogs. Brave. They protect people. Did he scare you?" Lily shook her head slowly. Her lips pressed together. Amanda sighed. The beep of the microwave startled them both. Back on Maple Street, Ranger curled up beneath his usual tree. A small box sat beside him, filled with milk bones and wrapped in a paper towel. A child had left it there. Ranger didn't eat any yet. He just rested his head beside the box and closed his eyes. A few houses down, behind drawn blinds, a boy sat in his bedroom with headphones on and a locked door. Toby's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. The group chat had a link. The video. His name wasn't in it. But he knew. And so did his father. Downstairs, Mr. Reed, a tall, lean man with hard eyes and a permanently creased forehead, watched the clip over and over, his mouth a thin line. He wore a pressed white shirt, his tie undone, and a glass of whiskey in one hand. He didn't call Toby down. He didn't say anything that night. But a reckoning had begun. Meanwhile, in a nearby apartment complex, a girl named Emma, age 9, watched the same video on her mom's tablet. She recognized Lily from lunch period, the quiet girl who never sat with anyone. Emma reached for a crayon and began to draw a picture of a dog sitting beside a girl on the sidewalk. She didn't know why, but it felt right. The rain came softly that Sunday night, tapping against the windows of the second-floor apartment like careful fingers. Inside, Amanda Sanders stood at the doorway of Lily's room, staring at her daughter curled beneath a bundle of blankets. The soft hum of the heater filled the silence, but Amanda wasn't listening. Her eyes had locked onto something else, the faint, darkened patch on the sheets, quickly covered by Lily before lying down. Amanda didn't speak. She didn't react. She simply closed the door quietly behind her, her breath shallow as she leaned against the hallway wall. Her scrubs were still damp from her shift, the hospital ID still clipped crookedly to her chest. Amanda was tall and lean, but the curve in her shoulders told the truth. This woman had been carrying something far heavier than double shifts or overdue bills. For months now, she had told herself Lily was just adjusting to the new school, the new neighborhood, the quiet absence of a father who never said goodbye. But wet sheets. Shaky hands. No eye contact. And now, the video. The moment she saw it, Amanda had dropped the spoon from her cereal. It was autoplayed by accident, some neighborhood Facebook post she didn't even follow. A dog, a backpack, a little girl. Her little girl. Frozen. Silent. And the dog. That German shepherd. The same one she'd seen lingering near the mailbox a few weeks ago. At the time, she thought it was just a stray, maybe waiting for someone. But now. Amanda sat at the edge of the couch, her legs shaking. She reached for her phone, pulled up the video again, and paused it on the exact frame Lily looked at the dog. There was something unspoken in that glance, an understanding. Not fear. Not even surprise. Something older. Something knowing. She put the phone down, stood up, and walked slowly to the dining table where Lily's backpack sat. She unzipped the front pouch and found a handful of folded papers. Most were drawings, one of a cracked swing, another of a small house with no windows. But one made Amanda's chest tighten. It was a rough sketch of a dog, standing alone in what looked like a shadowed hallway. No face. Just eyes, watching. The next morning, Amanda didn't go to work. She called the clinic and took a sick day, a rare decision for someone who worked 2 jobs just to keep food steady and rent paid. Lily woke up to find her mother already dressed, hair brushed, a backpack of her own slung over one shoulder. "We're not taking the bus today," Amanda said gently, kneeling to zip Lily's jacket. "I'm walking with you." Lily blinked, her mouth a small circle, but she didn't protest. As they left the apartment, the early air was crisp with the scent of wet pavement and pine needles. Maple and Fourth was just beginning to stir. Across the street, Ranger was already waiting beneath the dogwood tree, his body low to the ground, eyes calm but alert. Lily spotted him first. She didn't say a word, but her steps slowed. Amanda followed her daughter's gaze. For a moment, mother and daughter stood quietly, watching the dog watching them. Then Amanda whispered, more to herself than to Lily, "It's you, isn't it?" Ranger didn't move. He didn't need to. Amanda placed a hand on Lily's shoulder and gently nudged her forward. As they passed Ranger, she gave him a long look. There was no collar. No tag. But something about him felt present. A presence, not a pet. At school, Amanda walked Lily to the front office. The woman behind the desk, Mrs. Callahan, was a round-faced woman in her late 40s with horn-rimmed glasses and a warm, rehearsed smile. "Good morning. Are you here for an appointment?" Amanda nodded. "I'd like to talk to someone. About my daughter." Mrs. Callahan's smile faded slightly. "Of course. Is this, regarding a teacher? Or? It's about something that's been happening. I think." Amanda glanced down at Lily. "And someone who's been noticing it before I did." The office buzzed quietly as Mrs. Callahan stepped away to speak into the intercom. A few minutes later, Principal Eric Denner stepped into the room. He was a tall, angular man in his mid-50s, dressed in navy slacks and a gray vest. His demeanor was formal, but his voice was kind, if somewhat detached. He had the air of a man used to solving problems through policy and protocol, not feeling. "We can talk in my office," he offered, gesturing toward the hall. Amanda and Lily followed. Meanwhile, back outside, Ranger had found a spot near the side fence by the bike racks. A few kids spotted him and pointed. He didn't flinch. A soft voice called his name, though it wasn't really his name, not yet. It was Max, a boy in Lily's class, small and round-faced, with thick glasses and oversized shoes that always squeaked on tile. Max had seen the dog in the video. He'd seen the backpack. And more importantly, he'd seen Lily last week, her eyes wide with something he couldn't name when Toby stepped into the hallway. Max walked closer, holding a cracker in his hand. Ranger sniffed it, didn't eat it, but didn't walk away either. "You're not just a dog," Max whispered. "I think you're kinda like a soldier. Or something." Inside the principal's office, Amanda sat across from Mr. Denner, her hands loosely clasped in her lap. "I've noticed changes in Lily," she said slowly. "Sleep issues. Bedwetting. She draws things that aren't normal for her. And then I saw that video. The one with the dog. I think he's protecting her. But from what?" Mr. Denner hesitated. "We haven't had any formal complaints. Nothing alarming. Our staff is trained to look for bullying, but sometimes, things slip past." "I know," Amanda said, her voice firmer. "That's why I need you to help me look harder." He nodded. "I'll speak with the staff. Review footage. Perhaps her teacher." She's in Miss Janice's class. Ah. Mr. Denner allowed himself a small smile. You're in good hands then. She notices everything. Amanda exhaled. I hope so. That evening, Lily sat on the edge of her bed, brushing the ears of a small plush fox she hadn't touched in weeks. Amanda entered the room, sat beside her, and held out a drawing. It was Lily's sketch of the dog again. Only this time, Amanda had added something to it, her own drawing, clumsy and soft, of herself, sitting beside the dog. You're not alone, Amanda whispered. Even when I didn't see it, someone did. And now I see it too. Lily looked at the drawing. Then at her mother. For the first time in weeks, her lips parted. His name, she whispered, is Ranger. Amanda blinked. Is that what you call him? Lily nodded once. He doesn't leave. Even when I do. Amanda wrapped an arm around her daughter and pulled her close. Outside, on the street corner, the wind picked up. Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching. The lights of Springdale flickered quietly behind him. And still, he watched. The hallways of Springdale Elementary smelled faintly of disinfectant and crayons that Monday morning. The buzz of fluorescent lights filled the spaces where voices had yet to rise, and rows of backpacks sagged from wall hooks like tired shoulders. Everything looked normal. The kind of normal that slips past adults who move too quickly and assume too much. Amanda had returned to work, but her mind remained elsewhere. Her talk with Principal Denner had been polite, professional, and, somehow, empty. He'd promised to review protocols and ensure emotional safety. Words, stacked neatly like brochures in a counselor's waiting room. But Amanda knew now, words meant little unless someone was willing to listen underneath them. Back at school, the silence hadn't broken, but it had started to tremble. Max Fielding, 3rd grade, sat quietly at his desk that morning, fidgeting with the zipper on his coat sleeve. Max was a small boy with wide-set hazel eyes and hair that never stayed flat no matter how hard his mother brushed it. He was often overlooked, not because he was shy, but because he had perfected the art of blending in. His father had once called him too sensitive, and Max had learned it was safer to stay unnoticed. But today, he couldn't keep it in anymore. After lunch, Max walked slowly down the long corridor toward the main office. His hands were sweating. He paused twice, once near the water fountain, once outside the computer lab. Both times, he considered turning back. But then he thought about what he'd seen. And what he'd heard. Inside the front office, Ms. Carla, the receptionist with short curly hair and bright scarves, looked up from her mug of tea. She was in her early 60s, always smiling, but today her expression softened when she saw Max. Sweetheart, are you lost? Max shook his head. I need to talk to someone about Toby. Her brow furrowed. Toby Reed? He nodded once. He says things. Scary things. And he does stuff too. Carla's voice lowered. Why don't you come sit in here for a moment? She led him into the adjacent counselor's room, where the walls were painted a gentle sky blue and a beanbag chair waited in the corner. Inside was Mr. Nathan Rossner, the school counselor. Mid-30s, lanky, with kind eyes and sleeves always pushed up as if he were late to help someone. He didn't ask Max why he was there. He just offered a juice box and waited. And when Max finally spoke, it came out in pieces. He said, if I told anyone, he'd make my mom disappear. Like Lily's dad. Rossner paused, fingers frozen over his notepad. Did you see him hurt Lily? Max hesitated. No. Not where people see. But on the bus, he kicks her backpack. He whispers. Says stuff so only she can hear. And sometimes he looks at me too. Like he knows I saw. Rossner's voice dropped. Why didn't you tell someone sooner? Max's answer came in a whisper. Because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Until the dog started watching. That afternoon, Max's name wasn't mentioned during staff meetings. His story wasn't made public. But something shifted behind the scenes. Quiet phone calls. A meeting between Rossner and Principal Denner. A quick check on security footage. And a note slipped into Miss Janice's mailbox with 4 words, "Watch Lily. Watch Toby." Meanwhile, on the edge of the schoolyard, Ranger sat beneath his now familiar tree, the one near the fence with the bent wire. It had become his post. And the kids, those brave enough, had begun to acknowledge him. A few even brought offerings. That morning, a small girl with braided pigtails and a backpack covered in glitter stickers approached Ranger with a Ziploc bag. Her name was Olivia Ng, 2nd grade, bubbly and curious, always humming under her breath. She wasn't in Lily's class, but she'd seen the dog in the video and had decided he was her hero. Inside the bag were 3 vanilla cookies. Ranger sniffed them politely, then lay his head on his paws. Olivia giggled, sat cross-legged in front of him, and began to tell him about her cat named Mr. Fluffernutter and how he hated rain. "He's scared of everything," she whispered. "But you're not. That's why you're magic." Another child joined, Jeremy, who was usually the class clown but now knelt beside the dog, watching his quiet eyes. Before long, 4 more came. No one made a scene. They didn't shout or pet him wildly. They just sat. As if something about Ranger made them slow down. From the teacher's lounge window, Miss Janice watched. She sipped her coffee slowly, her thoughts far from lesson plans. When she stepped back into her classroom, Lily was at her desk, finishing a drawing. Her paper was covered in soft pencil marks, a child, sitting on a bench, surrounded by shadows. But beside her was a figure, a large dog, eyes wide, sitting still. Janice knelt beside her. "Lily," she said gently. "Can I ask, what's his name?" Lily's pencil paused. "Ranger." Janice smiled. "It suits him." Later that day, in a quiet meeting room near the front office, Principal Denner, Rossner, and Miss Janice reviewed a short segment of footage from the school bus. It wasn't dramatic, just seconds of Lily boarding, Toby stepping behind her, his mouth moving without sound. But her flinch, that was real. And now they had a name. Max. That evening, Amanda received a call. It was brief, just a check-in, nothing definitive. But when she hung up, her hands trembled. "They're looking into it," she told herself. Finally. Outside, Ranger stood at the corner again. This time, a piece of colored string had been tied gently to the tree near him, a child's way of claiming a place. His place. And for the first time since he arrived in Springdale, someone had drawn a small chalk heart beside where he slept. He didn't move. But he saw it. And he stayed. The sun broke through the cloud cover that Thursday morning with an intensity Springdale hadn't seen in weeks. The light fell in wide golden sheets across the school courtyard, turning wet leaves into fragments of glass and shadows into soft silhouettes. The kind of brightness that should have felt comforting. But inside the staff conference room of Springdale Elementary, the air was thick, not with sunlight, but with tension. Folded chairs lined the perimeter of the long, narrow room. Along the front wall, a mounted monitor waited in black silence. Principal Denner stood near the table, flipping through a small notepad. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow, a rare break in his usually buttoned-up appearance. He looked 10 years older than he had last week. Next to him sat Mr. Rossner, the counselor, fingers tented under his chin, gaze steady but exhausted. On the other side of the table sat 2 parents. Gregory and Eliza Reed. Gregory was a tall man in his 40s, dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit with a crimson pocket square, every hair in place. He had the kind of face that rarely cracked, controlled, refined, but vaguely threatening, like a man who'd once made a junior associate cry during a board meeting and never thought about it again. Eliza sat beside him, petite and angular, with tightly pinned blonde hair and a pearl necklace. Her hands were clasped in her lap so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. They weren't here to listen. They were here to defend. "Let's begin," Denner said quietly. The screen came to life with a faint click. It was grainy footage, typical for an old school bus camera, but it was clear enough. Time stamped, 6:46 a.m. The door opened. Lily stepped inside, backpack pulled tight. Toby entered just behind her. There was no sound, but the movement spoke louder. He turned toward her just enough to block her path. His mouth moved. Lily stiffened. He stepped backward deliberately, causing her to stumble into a seat's edge. Then, in one swift motion, he yanked the backpack from her shoulder and tossed it down the aisle. She froze. No one else turned to look. Not even the driver. The footage ended. No one spoke at first. Eliza cleared her throat. "That hardly constitutes bullying. Children are rough with each other." "She didn't even try to defend herself," Gregory added. "You're reading too much into this." Rossner's voice remained calm. "It's a pattern. Not just a single moment. And multiple students have come forward with concerns." "Anonymous students?" Gregory snorted. "Convenient." Before Denner could respond, the door behind them creaked open. Heads turned. Amanda Sanders entered quietly, holding a faded lavender backpack in her hand. She wore simple jeans and a navy windbreaker, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. Tired lines framed her face, but her eyes were sharp. She said nothing at first, just walked forward, placed the backpack on the table, and met Gregory's eyes. "This," she said, her voice calm, "is the third backpack I've had to replace in 2 months." Gregory leaned back. "Perhaps your daughter is careless." Amanda didn't flinch. "Perhaps your son is cruel." Silence. Then came the bark. Not loud. Not frantic. Just, purposeful. Everyone turned toward the window that faced the east side of the courtyard. The glass caught the sun like a mirror, but behind it, a shape moved. Ranger. He stood just beyond the edge of the hedges, back straight, eyes fixed on the door. And in his mouth, dangling carefully from his jaws, was a small object. A backpack. The old one. The one Lily had dropped 3 days ago during morning rush, never recovered. It was tattered now. Slightly muddy. But unmistakable. Ranger stepped forward and dropped it at the base of the door. Gasps rippled through the room. Eliza's lips parted. Denner blinked slowly. Amanda walked to the door, opened it, and bent to retrieve the backpack. Ranger didn't move. Didn't try to enter. He just looked up at her, calm and still. Denner stepped beside her. I didn't even know this was missing." Amanda turned. He did. They re-entered the room. No one spoke for a long while. Then Rossner stood. "I suggest a temporary suspension while we complete further investigation," he said to Denner, not a suggestion so much as a line in the sand. Gregory opened his mouth, but Denner cut him off. "Agreed." He turned to Amanda. "We'll be placing additional staff on morning supervision. And I believe this time, we listen better." Amanda nodded. "That's all we needed." Later that day, Ranger stood again beneath the tree by the fence. A small cluster of children sat cross-legged nearby, quiet as monks. Olivia brought peanut butter crackers this time. Max simply sat, legs pulled to his chest. Inside the classroom, Miss Janice was writing the word empathy on the board. Behind her, Lily added a final touch to her newest drawing, a girl in a field, holding hands with a dog. Behind them were shadowy figures, no longer looming, just fading. The announcement came Monday morning, slipped into homeroom like a whisper on the intercom: "This Friday, Springdale Elementary will host Truth Day. A chance for students to share something they've never had the chance to say. No grades. No judgment. Just voices. The message was read by Miss Caldwell, the assistant principal, a stocky woman in her 50s with a short gray bob and a blunt, no-nonsense tone. But something about her voice cracked slightly at the end, like maybe, even she had something unspoken tucked away. By lunch, the school buzzed like a hive stirred awake. Teachers explained the rules in class, students could write a letter, draw a picture, or speak aloud in the auditorium. It was optional. No one would be forced. But still, something stirred. In room 12B, Lily Sanders sat quietly, her fingers wrapped around a stub of pencil. Miss Janice had given her students an early start, 1-page, lined paper, no prompts. Just a header, if I could speak, I'd say. Lily stared at the paper so long her eyes blurred. Around her, other kids wrote with surprising speed. Olivia hummed as she wrote about her cat being run over last summer. Max was doodling nervously in the margin before starting. Even Jeremy, who never sat still, seemed thoughtful. But Lily was frozen. Until Ranger walked by. He wasn't supposed to be there, not really. But Miss Janice had pulled a few strings. Officially, the school had no policy about dogs that didn't cause disruption. Unofficially, nobody was willing to be the first to say no to Ranger anymore. He didn't bark. He didn't beg for attention. He simply walked quietly past the open door, paused by the window, and looked in. Lily's eyes met his. Her fingers moved. And she began to write. On Friday, the auditorium was filled. Folding chairs stretched row by row across the polished floor. Bright banners reading, "Your Voice Matters," hung above the stage. Principal Denner stood at the side, unusually quiet, arms folded. Mr. Rossner moved between rows, handing out tissues just in case. Parents had been invited. Some came reluctantly. Some didn't come at all. Amanda sat in the third row, a hand resting on her knee, the other holding Lily's small backpack in her lap. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they found him. Ranger. He sat near the edge of the stage. Denner had finally relented, placing a small mat in the corner with a sign above it that read, "Guest of Honor." Children occasionally reached out to pat his back as they passed. Ranger remained still, eyes always forward, like he knew something important was about to happen. The first speaker was Olivia. She read a letter to her grandmother who had passed, her voice shaking but her smile wide by the end. Then came Jeremy, who shared he was afraid of the dark but more afraid of being called a crybaby. One by one, the children stood. Each voice like a pebble thrown into still water. Then Lily rose. She didn't look at the crowd. Not at first. Her hands gripped a single sheet of paper, edges slightly bent. Miss Janice walked her to the stage, then stepped back. Lily's small figure stood before the mic. Her voice came low at first, barely audible. But no one moved. No one rustled. The entire room leaned in. "I used to be scared," she said, eyes still on her paper. "Because someone made me feel like I didn't matter." Ranger shifted slightly below, ears turning. "I didn't speak," Lily continued, "because I thought no one would listen. I thought, if I was quiet, it would stop." Her voice cracked. She paused, breathing. "But then someone barked for me." The words hung in the air. She looked up. Someone who couldn't speak either. "But he saw me. And he barked. And that's when I knew. I didn't have to be afraid anymore." Amanda covered her mouth with one hand. Her shoulders trembled. Ranger didn't move. But his head tilted just slightly. "I want to say thank you," Lily said, louder now. "To Ranger. For speaking when I couldn't." Silence. Then the first clap. Then another. Until the whole room rose to its feet. Lily stepped back. She didn't smile. But she didn't cry either. She simply turned and walked down the steps. And Ranger, breaking his stillness, rose too. He met her halfway down the aisle. And as she passed him, her hand brushed his fur. Just once. But it said everything. The weeks that followed Truth Day carried the quiet hum of change. It wasn't loud or sudden. It moved like spring, soft, invisible at first, but undeniable when you stopped to look. The children at Springdale Elementary still scraped chairs, forgot homework, and giggled during silent reading, but there was a new stillness under it all. Like the ground had settled after a long tremble. And every morning, Ranger was there. He no longer had to sneak beneath fences or sit in shadows. A small wooden sign had been planted near his usual spot by the tree, reserved for Ranger, Springdale's guardian. It was hand-painted by Olivia and Max, their uneven letters carefully traced in blue and gold. Beneath it, a water bowl sat beside a fleece-lined cushion donated by a local pet store. Ranger rarely used it. He preferred the dirt. Preferred the earth beneath his paws. But he stayed. Each day. He no longer belonged to one child. He belonged to them all. After the Truth Day assembly, something had changed in Lily too. Her gait had loosened. Her eyes, once always scanning the edges of the floor, now lingered longer on faces. She still didn't speak much, but her silences were no longer out of fear. They were simply pauses, thoughtful, soft. On the third Monday after the assembly, she walked into class and sat next to Olivia without being asked. By Thursday, they were trading stickers and drawing paper turtles together. Lily had found her way back to childhood. One afternoon, as dismissal echoed across the speakers, Amanda arrived earlier than usual. She stood near the fence, watching as Lily emerged from the building, hand in hand with Olivia. The sight pulled something loose in Amanda's chest, a kind of release that came not with tears, but with breath. Full and deep. Ranger stood a few feet away, nose pointed toward the breeze, tail resting still. Amanda walked to him and crouched low. She hadn't spoken directly to him since the day of the backpack. Not because she didn't want to, but because, in some unspoken way, it had never felt necessary. Ranger didn't ask for words. He seemed to hear everything that mattered in the quiet. She reached out and brushed her fingers across his shoulder. His coat was coarse at first, then soft underneath, like a soldier's uniform left out in the sun too long. "Thank you," Amanda whispered. "For not giving up when we almost did." Ranger blinked slowly, the kind of blink dogs do when they trust you. When they're not afraid to close their eyes for a moment. Lily joined her mother a second later, handing her a folded drawing. It was a picture of three figures, a girl, her mom, and a large dog with golden light around him. The caption read, "Thank you for barking for me." That night, Amanda framed it. Word of Ranger had long since spread beyond the school. A local newspaper ran a piece titled "The Silent Hero of Springdale." The town's mayor, a short man named Richard Dempsey with a comb-over and a perpetually startled look, declared April 3rd as Guardian Dog Day, complete with a ribbon ceremony that Ranger promptly ignored in favor of sitting in the shade. More surprising was the woman who came after the article went live. Her name was June Keller, late 60s, with silver hair in a bun and a walking cane with hummingbird carvings along the shaft. She ran the town's small animal rescue on the West End, the one most people forgot was still open. She had eyes the color of weathered books and the patience of someone who had lost more animals than she could name. She arrived one Thursday morning, not with a leash or a crate, but a simple question. "Does he belong to anyone?" Amanda and Principal Denner had exchanged a look. Then Denner had replied, "He belongs to whoever needs him most." June nodded. "Then he belongs here." And just like that, the school and rescue center worked out an agreement. Ranger would be vetted, gently chipped, and checked by the town vet, Dr. Morales, a quiet, barrel-chested man with soft hands and a soft heart. There were no tags. No collars. Just a record that said, Ranger, Community Protector. Safe. Sound. Loved. Lily was there for his appointment. She held his paw while the vet checked his ears and heartbeat. Ranger didn't flinch once. When it was over, she placed a sticker on his fur that said Good Patient. It stayed there all day. That weekend, Amanda and Lily walked to the school together on a Saturday morning to drop off a donation box for the library. The streets were quiet. Birds fluttered across the early sky, and somewhere nearby, a lawnmower hummed a lazy tune. When they reached the corner of Maple and 4th, Ranger was already there. He sat at his usual post, watching the spot where the bus would come in 3 days. His back was to the street, his body relaxed. A child's mitten sat at his feet, a lost item he must have found and guarded like treasure. Amanda crouched beside Lily, wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulder, and watched the dog in silence. Then, without fanfare, she whispered, "Thank God for sending us an angel." Lily looked up at her, confused. An angel? Amanda smiled. One with 4 legs and eyes that know how to listen. Ranger's ears flicked once at the sound of their voices. But he didn't turn. He just stayed. As if he understood something that the rest of the world had only just begun to see. That sometimes, the most powerful voices don't come from mouths. They come from presence. From loyalty. From love. The greatest protectors in life are not always the loudest, they're the ones who show up, stay close, and stand between us and the darkness, even when we don't ask them to. In a world where so many stay silent, sometimes it takes one voice, or one bark, to remind us that every child deserves to be seen, heard, and protected. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Who was the quiet guardian in your life, the one who stood by you when no one else did?